Welcome to Educating the Human Potential, where we explore strategies to empower learners, educators, and parents through a Montessori lens.
My name is Biff Maier.
And I'm Nicole Coman. So today's topic, I think, going to be a fun one because we have some guests
Well,
here.
I know it's going to be fun for me.
Well, especially for you, given the fact that you know both of our guests. When we were thinking about this particular episode and topics around this, we thought to ourselves, okay, this podcast is an educational podcast. It is not solely a Montessori podcast, but of course we have the expertise from you that lends itself to the Montessori. And we want to explore that a little bit. But the idea is to really look into a variety of different educational philosophies as we interview people along the way. And one topic that comes up for me a lot, and I don't know about you, when I was working in a Montessori school years ago, is how do these kids do after Montessori? Because, traditionally I'll just speak for the US, there's not many Montessori schools that offer high school programming, right? So when people are trying to choose a particular educational philosophy for their child, whether it be from preschool or middle or elementary school or middle school, is, how are these kids going to do later on when they're not in that very specific Montessori environment?
It's the most common question that parents ask, I think. They say, we're giving this gift to our child now, but are we crippling them for the future?
Right.
Are they going to be able to handle the what some people call the real world?
Sure.
So I think it is everybody's question.
And so with that, we're very lucky to have two guests on today, and I can't wait to speak with them. These two guests are both current seniors, is that correct?
Seniors in high school, yes.
Seniors in high school, but they both went through the Montessori program here at Lexington Montessori.
Yeah, all the way through. They both started very young.
Wow.
And went up through middle school.
And now they're both in more traditional educational settings. And so it'll be really interesting to hear kind of, how that transition went for them as they left Montessori, how they're still using what they've learned from Montessori as they're applying. I think they're both applying to colleges, no?
They're both right in the middle of it, I'm sure.
But I think at the end of the day, the idea behind this to share with our listeners is just to hear a little bit more about what works in terms of Montessori for different types of learners and how whatever they're learning early on transitions to the real world, as you said, right? Yeah. So life after Montessori.
I mean, I know what I want to hear. I'm curious about the relationships they've built, because it seems to me like school in the end is really all about relationships with the kids that you're learning with, relationships with the teachers that you have. And I'm curious about whether they feel like they were prepared to be bold learners and in the way they sought relationships, learning relationships with both their teachers and also with their peers. I'm curious about how the type of learning, which at a Montessori school often involves an awful lot of hands-on learning and project learning, and how that translates to the more conventional approach. The other thing, speaking of relationships, what they're used to when they leave Montessori is a multi-age group, because they're always in a 3-year age span or a 2-year age span in the case of the middle school, in which they have, they usually have students that are older than they are that are showing them the way, or younger than they are that they are helping. And I'm always curious about how that translates as they move on. And then I guess the other thing that's a big transition that I'm curious about is how they transition to a different kind of assessment of their work, because the bulk of their assessment when they leave a Montessori program has been formative assessment. Mostly it's teachers checking how they're doing in order to prepare them for their next learning. And when they reach high school, no matter where they go to high school, I think generally speaking, the emphasis on summative assessment, and they have to get they're getting evaluated in addition to being assessed. And so I'm curious to see how they have dealt with that, how they transition to that.
That's a very big difference, right? As they transition out of Montessori and having the idea of that there's this grading rubric to now use, as opposed to the formative kind of, we'll call it grading, that they're used
largely on observation, sure. Instead of on, I don't know how to phrase it.
It's so foreign to you, you don't know how to phrase it.
Instead of being based on right and wrong,
or point system and whatnot.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like we have a lot of topics to cover with these two, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. I am thrilled to welcome some old friends today. We have Josie Lamenza and Symona Bayatian, who are both seniors in high school now and went to Montessori school here at Lexington Montessori School. So I've known them for a really long time. But I love the idea that we're able to look back at your last 4 years post Lexington Montessori School, and then back further than that, sort of explore your experience. Well, let's start with current events. So you're both seniors in high school. What are you thinking is next?
I'm going to go to Hamilton College, most likely. And I kind of want to study philosophy, but I'm interested in like kind of all the like liberal arts stuff. Also want to take like a London program before I start Hamilton. And I feel like that'll be fun because I know London has like a huge history and lots of like, I think you could like watch like different plays. You could do like a tour of like all these different like artsy things. And I feel like that just seems like really interesting to do before I start college.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
For me, I am still figuring out where I'm going. I had applied early decision to Columbia University and I got deferred. So we will find out what the result is in March. I take it still as a win no matter what happens. But I have been accepted into schools such as Fordham University, Bryant University, which is one of my safeties. And then I'm exploring more schools in the Boston area and New York. So we'll see.
So you're a full-time applicant at this point.
Yes, I am. I'm a waiting applicant. Yeah.
Okay, so it's interesting that you guys are now, I'm sure you're thinking a fair amount about this transition. It's a huge transition. You're gonna most likely move away from home, and so that'll be a brand new transition into a different kind of learning experience. So can you remember back to your transition from Montessori when you left middle school here and you started? Well, there's a difference between your two experiences because you left LMS and went to an independent school, and Josie, you left LMS and went into a public high school. And so I think it's really good to hear the sort of a contrast of those experiences as well.
Well, for me, I think it was definitely a different, definitely different environment and definitely different, like kind of like, culture maybe, because it was like a very kind of cliquey school. That's at least what I noticed when I first came in. It would be like, oh, the female hockey players all hang out, or the nerds or whatever. Like it's kind of so, it felt like, oh, this is like such a high school movie kind of cliques. But as I kind of got more used to it, I noticed that people kind of didn't have to stick to these like cliques, or like people would sit with different people during lunch, and there would be kind of a little bit more of that. And I do think it was like going from LMS to high school, it was like, I feel like I was able to kind of get along with almost anyone. Like I wasn't feeling like, oh, I have to hang out with like the kids that like singing like me. Like I could kind of be like, oh, I have something in common with most people. So I felt like I was able to talk to them. But it was definitely weird to have like such a big school and new rules. And like I remember, I think first few weeks they like had to like close a bathroom because people were vaping, and I was like, wow, that just would like never happen at LMS. It felt so weird, but yeah.
And for me, after I graduated from LMS, I went on to the Cambridge School of Weston, which is where I am now. And going into independent school, I think I saw some, similarities and differences in terms of like both the social and academic scene. I can touch base on the social aspect first. I mean, going into high school, like I feel like this is the same experience for everybody. You're very nervous, anxiety, you come into school, you don't know anybody, and then you realize, oh, all these ninth graders are in the same boat as you. So you kind of just find your people. And it was different in the sense that there was obviously more kids. But again, Josie went to public school, which is probably in the thousands, and my school is like 300 kids max. So it wasn't that big of a difference. Like I didn't feel like I was in this like huge world of people I didn't know. But it wasn't too bad of a transition. And then in terms of the academics, I think coming from Montessori school, I was very prepared to be independent, because I think that's something that Montessori school really prepares you for. Like, how can you take charge of your own education? How can you, create this natural, creativity and natural passion for, knowledge and learning that you get at LMS. And that was like the similar, I guess, environment at my current school. Kids are driven, and then you kind of feel motivated by the other students in your classroom, which is very similar to what I felt at LMS.
So would you say you going to this independent school, would you say it was an easier transition than perhaps maybe some other friends that went to a larger?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, I think I've never gone to public school, but I would say that it was probably most definitely much easier going in, just like, 300 kids, I can't imagine. It's like basically going to university, where there's like thousands of people. But here it's more of like a tight-knit community. Like you basically, every way you turn your head, you kind of know who this person is. You say hi, oh, this and that. Like you kind of have a connection with everybody. So it was very similar.
It's also interesting, I think, that there's kind of a history of people from this school, from Lexington Montessori School, going to that school. So I'm wondering whether you benefited from the people that were already there when you arrived.
Yeah, like I'd definitely say so. Like all the students, most kids who actually go to my current school, like they came from different independent schools, or they even transferred from other independent schools. Like some of my close friends, they transferred from schools like Lawrence Academy, or even some kids who I'm close with transitioned from in the 11th grade from a public school. But most of the ninth graders all came from like some independent school. So it was like we all kind of had that similarity. So we could that's kind of the first thing we connected on. Oh, where'd you come from? Oh, I came from this and that private school. Oh, that's cool. And then kind of went on from there. Yeah.
Beyond going into leaving a smaller independent Montessori school and going into a very large public high school, so beyond the fact that it's a lot more kids, what was the biggest shock?
I would say the biggest shock is that it was kind of there was a big disconnect between, I think, teachers and students. Like, I feel like teachers often had this like distrust of students. Like when students would ask to like leave to use the bathroom, they'd be like, "You're not going to go on those phones, are you? You're not going to go vape in the bathroom, are you?" And it felt, it was not every teacher. Some teachers had a really good connection with students and would like ask them about their day and stuff like that. But I think there was kind of like there was a feeling that teachers were just there to teach and make sure you didn't do anything wrong, and kids were just there to just consume information. And I felt like that was very strange for me. Or like when a teacher would be out sick at LMS, I remember you'd always hear about the day next. Oh yeah, this thing, I had this appointment. But for teachers at school, you weren't even supposed to like ask them why they were sick. They were just out.
Question.
Yeah, it's too personal. So yeah, that was definitely pretty strange, having that, like not having strong relationships with your teachers like that. But I think I was able to like figure out how to form those with some teachers, I guess.
Yeah. And I think, again, for people that might not know too much about Montessori and kind of the whole dynamic between student and teacher, right? Can you speak a little bit about that and just describe kind of what it looked like for you during your Montessori, call it career, and how it seems like I can just see, and I know our listeners probably can't see you, but I can see by your face that you really enjoyed having that personal connection with your teachers. And so can you just speak to that and share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think like we only kind of like in middle school, we only had like 3 or 4 teachers, something like that. And so we would like, I remember going on like hikes with Kim to like like identify different mushrooms, and she would get like so excited about the different mushrooms. And it felt like you were kind of with a friend. And of course they had authority, and of course they would teach us. But I felt like it was more than teaching. And I felt like it was also kind of more of a parent role, or someone who cares about you and also like teaches you and kind of understands you. And I feel like that's kind of important because it makes kids feel safe enough to like ask questions and like really have discussions where they feel like they can like talk to teachers and talk to their friends in this kind of environment.
It sounds very collaborative, right, between teacher and student.
Well, I'm wondering whether it seems to you like you retain something from that experience, as well as experiencing it from your teachers, so that when you go to high school, are your relationships with teachers any different from most other kids' relationships with teachers?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I kind of noticed is that a lot of kids don't quite raise their hands when the teachers ask questions as much, or like when the teacher asks like a discussion question, like, what do we think about this story? Kids were much less likely to raise their hands because I think they were used to a teacher kind of shutting them down and being like, oh, that's the wrong interpretation. So the teachers that I kind of knew were curious. Like currently I have an English teacher who's like very curious, and I kind of was able to like be like, I'm just going to raise my hand and say like what I think. And like, hopefully that'll prompt other people to like try that too. So I think that like LMS made me able to be like, I can trust teachers enough to be like, I think they're going to listen to me. And I think that they are going to like want to hear what I say, I guess. And I feel like that was important in like being able to trust teachers so that I can have relationships with them.
It's wonderful, of course, to hear you describe that, Josie, and not really surprising, Nicole. I mean, we bring back alums frequently to talk to parents, and one of the things that I hear from alums pretty commonly is that they're surprised that their classmates, when they get to high school, don't know that kids and teachers are on the same side. They think that they're somehow, two completely different groups of people. And knowing that teachers actually want to help you and are on your side, and for the most part, that's why they're in this business, gives you the advantage that you have the courage to go ask questions, to talk about problems that you have,
to participate.
And if you're afraid of showing any vulnerability, then it really does cripple you as a student.
Right. And I'm just listening to both of your descriptions about your experiences in Montessori, and I can't help but think beyond, preparing you, and I keep hearing the word independence. You feel more independent. You're in charge of your own education, right? You have this drive, and you feel like you can make choices for yourself, right? And I guess, to some parents, I imagine they would think, well, you don't really have a whole lot of choices in high school, right? You have to just go through the motions and do what you need to do. But ultimately, I feel like hearing you guys describe your experiences makes me feel like you sound really ready for college, right? And so I wanted to just ask you if you both felt that way, if you're feeling intimidated about college, or you feel even more prepared because of your Montessori experience. So can you share that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the whole thing that has set me up for success, both for college and high school, was Montessori. Montessori was, again, like that whole independent aspect. You have this mutual respect with your teachers. You're traveling abroad in the 7th and 8th grade. Like I think it was my 8th grade, right? We went to Puerto Rico, and that was an insane experience. You go with like 7 other kids in your class and like 3 of your teachers. It's like not something you'd normally hear from any regular, middle school. And then going into high school, like I'll touch base on a little bit about the similarities and then go on. But like in high school, like I think that I had so many similar opportunities. Like I got to do this exchange program with Japan called the Kakehashe program, where I traveled abroad to Tokyo, and then we flew to Okinawa, where we stayed with a homestay family, and we were there for like 10 days. That was an educational program that was kind of, I got to, experience through my school. And then also, what's similar to college is like my school has like office hours. So after school, after classes are over, teachers and students can meet. You can stay there for like an hour and a half. Like teachers want to help you. And that's like, when you go on these college tours, all they talk about is like, oh, the office hours, like this is such a great opportunity for you. This is what you take initiative, and that's how you make connection with your teacher and that your professor. And that's exactly what I feel like I've been doing throughout my, high school and Montessori experience. Yeah. Like just like touching base back on like that mutual respect with your teacher, like you feel comfortable enough where you can go to your teacher and really talk to them about whether it's something that's going on, how it's affecting your, academic space at the moment, or like asking them questions, like just being able to have a conversation on almost like an adult level, I'd say. Sure. It's really powerful. And just, I think my point is that like throughout Montessori and high school, I do feel really prepared. I think specifically high school has prepared me a lot for this college transition. But again, it all goes back to like that whole Montessori experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the foundational skills that you learned during your time, even as an elementary student, a preschool student. It starts very early when you're learning kind of the cadence between teachers and students and whatnot.
I mean, it does sound to me, Symona, like you have had a fairly remarkable high school experience in terms of having autonomy and having opportunities to make important choices, because that's not a common description of the high school experience. I mean, I know that I've had people come back and say that they had 4 years when they left here where they really didn't get to make any choices at all. And it really wasn't until they got to college that they got control of their education again, and they sort of had to put their choosing and their interests and their preferences on hold for 4 years. Yeah. I don't know whether you would say that that's your experience, Josie, but I mean, I think it's not uncommon in a really big, fairly conventional high school.
Yeah, I feel like to some extent, I feel like that. Like, I feel like we're not really granted that much choice. But I think even when like every single student has to take this exact English class, I still feel like you can still find the things that you enjoy, like a book that you like to read. And there's still ways that you can like be curious about the things that you're kind of not able to choose what you learn. Like I was learning about like memory and psychology, and you could just focus on like, oh, got to memorize all these parts of memory. Or you could, what interested me is I kind of like inspired a short story for me because I wanted to kind of explore like how memory relates to the self and stuff like that. So I feel like, yes, we're kind of, sometimes it feels like we're funneled into like, have to take this math class, have to take this history class, but I feel like you can still add like your own personality and your own interests to that and kind of expand on what you learn.
Is that a Josie thing, or is that a thing that you might have gotten from? I
do feel like some of my friends around me, I think they do feel this like, I have to do this, I have to do this problem, I have to finish this, and I feel like I totally get that. Sometimes it feels like it's so much like, memorize this formula, memorize this, that you can't really add your own creativity to it. So I get that, especially for people that have been in the public school system for a while and have just been like at the back of a classroom with their head down for like most of their lives with never really getting that like, but what do you want to study kind of thing. So I do think LMS kind of enabled me to succeed in maybe like a public school where you don't have as much choice and there's giant classroom sizes. But yeah, I don't think that my public high school experience was like all a bad thing.
Yeah. It's funny. I remember, I'll tell a short anecdote here that there's somebody who's now an adult who I remember coming back to talk to parents about life after Montessori. And she said that she, when she got to high school, she was doing everything as well as she possibly could. And it was killing her. There just was too much to do. And she was not getting enough sleep. She was feeling anxious. And one day, and she said it was in October, so that's not very long after school started. Right. She came home and she said to her mom, I think I've figured it out. I figured out that I can find out what's important to my teacher, and I can do those things really well. And then I can figure out what's important to me, and I can focus on those. But I don't have to focus on everything at the same level. Sure. And I thought, wow, to figure that out within a month in a new school, I mean, and that, that's a survival skill.
I also think, though, the bottom line, what I'm hearing again as the non-Montessorian at the table here is, Montessori allows for a child to develop that curiosity, that drive, right? And it's going to do you well, right, as you go on into the university, until you establish your careers, because you have that. You use the word autonomy, and I do love that. But it's just you have that drive. You have that drive, and something that Biff and I always talk about, and another thing that we have in common is we're lifelong learners. And this is why we really enjoy doing this podcast, because we get to meet really interesting people that have expertise in different areas, and just hearing your perspective is fascinating. And so what I'm trying to get at is I'm hearing from everybody that Montessori is teaching this really important foundational skill that I wish other educational call them principles would instill in young children, right? Because it's gonna be very beneficial to you as you become an adult and establish your careers. Does that make sense? I know I kind of went on a rant there, but I just find that to be so fascinating that it allows you to be prepared. I do have a question, though, something I was thinking about before we were going to meet today. So even though, Symona, you went into another independent school, it is not a Montessori school, but it's another independent school, and Josie, you at the public sector. One thing that just stands out to me that's different between either any of these to Montessori is that there's not a lot of hands-on learning, right? You don't have the materials in the classroom. Can you speak to that a little bit and tell us, was that a big shocker for you when you didn't have, the materials around the classroom or the movement, perhaps?
I honestly would argue that it was actually very similar in that sense. When I went into the Cambridge School of Weston, I had a lot of classes where it actually was hands-on, and a lot of the time, for example, in my history class right now, we're learning about youth subcultures, and we basically, instead of writing a normal research paper, we're doing research, but then we're creating an album cover with song titles that we're creating ourselves based off of the research that we've done and on our subculture, and it's literally hands-on, our own experience. And the same thing I've seen in math classes, where we'll have different, I'm in calculus right now, and some days we'll have literally different problems or different material that we need to learn at different tables, and you'll kind of stand up and you'll be rotating and working amongst different students, kind of learning and engaging, and it's honestly very similar, I'd say. I think obviously it's not in the same sense in math class here at LMS, you'd be learning with blocks, and I already forget what they're called, but all those little tables that you can use. And it's my sister still goes to LMS, and she always talks about the way she's learning and how it's helping her engage and how it's helping her not just just get the material down, but actually understand what she's doing and why she's doing it. So I think that's exactly, and that's been really powerful. And I feel I think I'd say that, I don't know if it's similar for Josie, but for me going into high school, it obviously wasn't the exact same, but it still had that same, they want you to have initiative in what you're doing. You have a choice in what you want to do. Obviously, if you're in my history class, if you're not someone who's creative, you don't want to make an album cover, then sure, go ahead, write your research paper, but you have that choice. You always have a choice. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I would say it did feel I would say in some of my other classes, they're I would say my English class right now and my psychology class, you're kind of able to do some different projects and stuff, and that where you can make we had to make a commercial in psychology class that was I think it was supposed to be using things that we learned in psychology to manipulate people. And doing things like that is always really fun. But yeah, it was a lot less of that, especially I still struggle in math, and I kind of had to learn how to I have to if you have to memorize a bunch of formulas, have to learn how to find little mnemonics or find fun ways to memorize the formulas, maybe making songs or trying to make them into little stories, I guess. So I guess I learned how to like learn in that way, which is, it's not exactly hands-on learning, but it's still like active learning and like a way of adding to what I'm learning. Yeah, but that was, I feel like in at least middle school of LMS, we did do a little less hands-on, and at least definitely math class. It was mostly like up on the board doing like writing out formulas. And I did struggle with that, but I had always struggled with math. So it wasn't different. Even like hands-on math, I didn't quite understand. So I think just being able to like figure out my own ways to understand it, like maybe blocks just wasn't like, the concept wasn't just clicking for me. So I had to over like a long period of time, it took me to like figure out that I had to find my own ways to kind of like actively learn in creative ways.
I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction, because I think in addition to autonomy and independence, the other thing that Montessori schools talk about a lot is collaboration and cooperation, and de-emphasizes competition, which is not true also in most high schools. I mean, you're competing for Columbia, you're competing for Hamilton, and so I'm wondering what the transition into an environment that was more competitive felt like.
Okay. Yeah. So going into high school, I think, there's different types of groups of people. There's a group of kids who are the smartest people you've met, but don't care about their grades. And then there's the kids who are like constantly pushing for, A's. And that's kind of, I feel like I fell into that category. So I feel like in that sense, there was that pressure where, I felt like I had to be, better than others. But that did slowly fade. I mean, I think there was less of a competitive environment in the sense that at my private school, there was a lot of opportunities that you can take, like, creating your own leadership clubs. And I run, a Christian affinity space at my school, which I started. And then I also have started like a winter sports club because I enjoy skiing. So like part of that is like organizing winter school trips. And I think little things like that, it can be competitive in the sense where it's like people are like, oh, how can I get involved? How can I put this on my resume? This and that. But I think that at my school, there was a more like natural way in the sense like that people just wanted to be involved. People wanted to bring, their own identity to a community. So I think even in academic competitive sense, there's also, it can be that like, it's also academic, but it's, it's a little bit different. Like people are competing, but it's also like, it's more like, what can I do and kind of bring to a community, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like where you currently are in school allows for that opportunity, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which seemingly it sounds like Montessori did as well, right?
Yes.
It allowed for a lot of opportunity for creativity or just initiation or, or initiative on new ideas, right? And they were always valued, right?
Yes.
And so that's what's so lovely about it as well, or at least that's what I'm hearing from you all.
Yes.
Let's talk about social emotional stuff. Sorry.
I'd like to get a comparison just for the competitive feelings.
I'll table my social emotional question.
Sure. Yeah, I felt like my friends might disagree with this, but I don't feel like my school is very competitive, at least between like kids. I feel like we often, like most of the table groups are at our school in every class are kind of like made like this, where you're kind of in a like this, and maybe there's like a board up here. So maybe the teacher will say something and then they'll be like, oh, now go over the homework with your peers, and your peers will like help you. Everyone at the table group will usually be like, oh, I know what this is. You just have to do this. And that's definitely, it's definitely very helpful to have that like collaborative. I do think we don't do too many like group projects, or like we don't have too many ways of like, okay, now switch up your table groups or work with a new type of people. It's usually like the same table groups the whole year. But it is nice to have that, like you can talk to your friends if you don't understand something and like understand that. So I wouldn't say it's like super competitive. Like even like I think I'm friends with someone who's like almost the valedictorian or something. He might be, but he didn't tell anyone that, and he really doesn't care about it that much. So I wouldn't say that we care that much as a school.
What about this is sort of connected, but I'm curious about what the impact of being graded has been for you, because
that's a great question.
I mean, that's a big shift. I mean, you got some grades in middle school, but I think the emphasis on grades. I'll just spill my real question here, which is that my greatest fear as a teacher is that kids, when they're being evaluated, they prioritize only the things that matter to their grade, and they tend to de-emphasize their own personal interests and their own curiosities because they've learned to figure out what the priorities of the evaluator are. And I'm wondering whether that's been your experience or whether you don't have to worry about that, Biff.
Well, yeah, I would say, I guess I have felt that. I did also feel that a little bit in middle school, just getting grades. You instantly are like, okay, what are the exact criteria? How do I do the bare minimum to reach that criteria? Because you have so little time, especially in high school, where it's just like, okay, I'm going to do the very bare minimum to get to that criteria. And I'm not going to try to like add a creative spin or anything because I don't have the time and I couldn't do that for every project. But it's just like kind of feels like it's like soul crushing to have to do that all the time. So I do find myself like sometimes especially if there's a creative assignment, I will work a lot more on it and like put in a lot more effort. And sometimes I don't like that. I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm spending so much time on this. I have to get my math homework done. But other times I feel like it's kind of my way of like fighting against that feeling of like, okay, I have to be the perfect student and get these perfect grades. So I do feel like having grades and like strict rubrics where it has every point that you have to meet can really limit students. But once you're able to kind of like figure out how to prioritize things and fit in time, you can kind of put more effort into things that you really enjoy or find that you can make fun for yourself, and then just kind of like get the other things done just to get them done.
So as the psychologist in the room, I think a lot about, I think when we talk about programs, when we talk about choosing a program for our kids or our kids choosing a program for themselves, we put so much emphasis into academics, right? And I think something that often falls by the wayside is the social emotional component, and whether or not that's going to support my child. I'll just speak for my children, but support my child and make them well-rounded and a supportive individual themselves, right, to others. And, what I know about Montessori, I feel like it really lends itself, the whole philosophy lends itself into social emotional development from toddler to middle school. And so can you both speak to that? Do you agree with that statement? Do you think it wasn't much different as you transitioned into a different program that wasn't Montessori? Do you think that Montessori prepared you from a social emotional standpoint? I'm just wondering if you had any ideas or thoughts on that, or if there was any differences at all.
Can I just, I don't want to rephrase your question.
No, but do it.
But I'm wondering whether it felt when you were in Montessori programs like social emotional development was a priority as an educational process, in addition to academics, in addition to, physical because I think Montessori educators would claim to be holistic in that way, that we try to take the time when kids need the time for whatever they most need, and if what they most need is to discuss the community, then we discuss the community. If what they most need is dealing with feelings about whatever, then that's I think what we do. It isn't considered an inconvenience. It's considered the program. But that's my,
that's
my
your
opinion.
take, right?
Yeah. And I don't know whether you felt like that was your experience. And I'm curious about whether A, it was, and B, whether you felt like that continued, that there was a similar priority for your social and emotional development as you went into high school?
Yeah, I think that at Montessori, like I have this one memory of when I was, I think, elementary. I had gotten into an argument with one of my friends, and, you know, I forget if it was like Pamela. She came up to me, one of my teachers, and she came up to me and she was like, okay, you guys are going to do a conflict resolution. I forget, I don't know the name, but like a practice, and basically you're going to figure out what's going on. So she positioned us to face each other, and she was like, okay, Symona, you're going to say what's bothering you, and then my friend, basically you're going to say what is bothering you, and then you guys are going to talk it out, and then you guys are going to hug in the end, and kind of, you know, so you can move on. And so I think experiences like this that I had, you know, throughout Montessori several times in different ways, I think it really prepared me how to be emotionally aware in myself, and emotionally aware in a sense like, how can I, you know, not sit in my sadness or sit in my frustration, but how can I attack it and move on? Mm-hmm. And so I've kind of seen that, you know, I've taken that into my high school experience, where if I'm having like, you know, a challenging time, like when my college application results first came out, you know, it's really stressful right now. Like, you know, senioritis I already feel it hitting in, and you feel really emotional. And I had like this huge test one day, and I was like, I literally cannot sit down and like study for this. It's impossible. Like it felt impossible. So I like emailed my teacher, and I was like, hi, Anne, like I received this results, and I'm just, you know, really exhausted, and I feel like I need a day. Can I take the test, you know, after tomorrow or like in a few days? And she was like, oh yes, Symona, like, yeah, take a whole week. Like you can prepare and you can get it done next week. So I feel like, you know, teachers almost respect you too when you take initiative into how you're feeling, and like that, instead of just like, you know, sitting at home, you know, laying in your bed the next day, you have to take this test that you're clearly going to bomb, but instead you're taking initiative and saying, I'm literally can't do this. So what can I do? How can I communicate with my teacher? How can I express to her my vulnerability? How can I stay in touch with how I'm feeling and really acknowledge that to really set myself up for success? Because I also think that I was listening to this podcast, and it was talking about like, you know, toxic positivity. It's like a lot of the time, you know, people are like, you know, doesn't matter how you're feeling, just like everything's going to be good. Like it's all about your mindset. But I think that people really have a hard time understanding, like you have to be able to acknowledge how you're feeling to really get past that. Because if you sit and you're like, you know, everything is fine, like that doesn't matter, I'm sad, whatever, like you're not gonna, in the end, it's gonna be worse. Like, yeah, you'll feel good about yourself in the few days and the few months that you're persevering, but then you're just gonna crash. So I think that, you know, Montessori really prepared me for that. Like, how can I be emotionally aware in myself, and how can I also like, you know, how can that benefit my relationships? How can that benefit my educational experience? And so, yeah, I think that it really did set me up for success in high school and so on.
And again, this common theme that keeps coming up, whether it be, you know, interacting with teachers, interacting with peers, is this the power of communication, right? And from a young age, and using your voice, voicing how you feel or want or needs, and all those things in your classes. And what I do love about the conflict resolution in Montessori, which I learned after being at a Montessori school for some time, is that if there is a conflict between students, and it doesn't matter if they're 5 years old or 15 years old, right? The teacher will take the time to pull the students aside, even in the middle of a lesson, in the middle of something, to have the two students be able to approach each other and work it out themselves at a very young age. And I thought that was such an incredible lesson, and to instill on a very young child, but also so important to translate into adulthood, right? Is because if we're having conflicts with one another and we're not speaking our mind or saying everything's fine and it really isn't, you know, that impacts everything, right? And so I do love how the philosophy allows for that social emotional piece, right? To be able to work things out amongst others, because that's a skill that we need to know as adults, and oftentimes isn't taught in class, you know, or in a traditional setting where it's, we got to get through this lesson or we got to memorize these formulas, versus, you know, two kids are having an issue and having the teacher there as the person to kind of, as the liaison or mediate the situation and help the students through it, I think is fantastic.
I think that is absolutely the priority. I don't think you can work on top of problems like that. You know, when there's emotional turmoil, You're just, you're not at your best in any other way. So you have to work with the turmoil. And I think Montessori teachers are trained to do that. They're trained to prioritize well-being.
And the community, right?
Yeah.
Because if there's conflict in the community, then that impacts everything, right? So I'm wondering, Josie, for you and from the social emotional piece, how did that work as you transitioned into high school?
Well, I think in LMS, it's like, I feel like it's like almost impossible to like not have a social life because like you kind of almost instantly have a friend group. Like I remember middle school, like we'd be having conversations and it'd just be like a circle of all the middle schoolers chatting because that's just like how it was kind of. It was like such a small group. And I feel like the prioritization of like pulling in people from like different backgrounds, different like cultural backgrounds, different gender identities. I feel like it makes it so that you can you learn to be friends with everyone because these are the people you got. You like got 12 people in your grade. Like these are your friends. And I think, well, going into high school, it was interesting because I think I didn't understand that like you weren't going to make friends just by being in class with these people because there's 30 people in a class and the teacher's talking the whole time. You're not going to make friends by just sitting next to someone. So I had to learn to be like, okay, I have to go to this club after school. I have to like actually like find time outside of school to meet people and make friends instead of just making friends by going on a hike during school time. Like, so I had to definitely learn how to do that. But I feel like I was prepared, especially to be like, you're a nice person. Great. We can become friends because just having that, like, I can understand you. You are a human being. We can become friends. It's really important because I think some people do sometimes feel like they have to only make friends with people that are just like them in a certain way. Like I had a friend that he said, I think he came here from China and he said he only made friends with other Chinese kids because he felt like they would only understand him. But he was like, but now I've learned to kind of like reach out and like make friends with like other people and that they also have like similar experiences, even if they're not right from China. And I feel like that's kind of important to like learn how to just instantly be in an environment where there's a lot of different people, I guess.
Yeah. I think one of the things that parents often think is that when a kid gets into middle school, they need a large peer group. They're adolescence is the transition into adulthood. You should be ready to be a grown-up and you need lots of people to be around. And
not be isolated, right?
Yeah, and it's just one of the great myths of developmental psychology that a lot of people have, that especially when you're in the early part of adolescence, it just seems to me like you need exactly what you were describing. You need a small group. You need a group where, because you're learning together, you get to know how each other thinks, how each other feels, because that's what's going on. And it just seems unfortunate that so many kids at the age of 13 and 14 are in what you were describing, in a place where the teacher's talking all the time and they're next to other kids, but they aren't engaging with other kids in a natural way.
They don't have the opportunity, right?
Right.
I do have a question, though, about that. As you were speaking, Josie, I was wondering to myself, so when you got to ninth grade, did you feel like, because for so long you had this community of students and you got to know them, right, really well because you spend 3 years together, right, in the same classroom. Did you feel the need to kind of, as soon as you got to the high school, to go out and find your people, because again, you transitioned with these kids for so long and then all of a sudden now you're starting all over. You don't have your community with you. So did you feel the need to kind of go out there and start your a new community around you, or how did that work?
I mean, okay, I'm going to be honest. I feel like when I got into high school at first, I kind of felt very alone because like I knew very few people. I like vaguely knew some people, but it wasn't like very good like connections. Sure. So I sort of felt like I just wanted to like survive through the day, and I wasn't focused on like making friends. I kind of expected it to just kind of come with school because I was used to just being able to just instantly click with people at LMS because you had that time. So I think the first at least few months I just did not make friends. I did not really like seek people out. So I had to I guess I had to learn how to do that. And yeah, it was kind of difficult to feel like you were I guess it felt kind of like a mall. Like it just felt like people would just come, random people would just come, take classes and leave. But I kind of learned to like understand that my grade might have more than like 200 people in it, but you can know like 50 of those people and you can be friends with like 10 of those people. And that still makes it so that you can see people in the halls and say hi. And the people that you start to like learn, oh, this person's really nice, or this person is really like a great person to talk to. You can kind of build more friendships with them. Sure. And I can choose like who I want to be my friends, but not only have the people befriend people that are exactly like me. Yeah. And I feel like that's definitely an important skill I learned.
Yeah. It takes a lot more effort, right? In that sort of situation or environment.
I think for me, it was always, this person makes me laugh.
Oh. But if you don't have the opportunity to find out if that person's
absolutely.
Funny, then how would you ever know, right?
Right?
And so I think that goes back to the whole point of, giving students the opportunity to get to know each other, right?
Yeah, and I think that like clubs at our school, that's kind of like the main part where you make friends. Sure. It makes it so that like kids who I think like grew up there like in the public school system since they were young and like in middle school, they would go to clubs and like that would be their only friends would be people that had the exact same interests as them. Yep. So I think there's a big importance to like if you have a school where with people with like a lot of different interests to have them somehow become friends instead of making the only time to be friends. Make friends is when you're with people that are exactly like you or have one same interest, I
mean, as much as Montessori really has these lovely opportunities to develop this, skills that are going to be very useful later on in life. It's also it blends nicely into becoming a student and getting prepared for high school or for college. Montessori plus this other environment that's not Montessori, right? But it allows you to be prepared for for college and testing and all of those things that maybe we're not doing in Montessori. Bridging those two together really makes you a well-rounded student. That's what I was trying to get to, or at least in my what's what I'm hearing from you all.
So the most important thing about the preparation is you figuring out who you are and what you bring to a situation, right? And, I'm sure there are lots of people who struggle with their own identity and their relationships and all that, despite how collegial Cambridge School of Weston is. There are people there that get lost. Yeah. And I'm sure that there are people like you, Josie, who go to a place that could be experienced as very impersonal, and they come away having had, an extraordinary interpersonal set of relationships. Right. So it really is, it's your own strength of character and
it's what you make it, right? And I love how you said it like that, because again, I think what's so lovely about Montessori from a very young age is it's teaching you these life skills that are so incredibly important and useful later on in life, as it relates to communication, as it relates to asking for your needs and wants and voicing it, and ultimately knowing that your voice matters. And I think that's the biggest thing I've learned from as I'm learning more about Montessori is each student's voice matters, and it's not.
Yeah, not only in class. Sure. Your voice matters to you. It also matters to your friends. Sure. Finding your own voice and finding who you are is just, absolutely. It's what it's all about, right. So.
And I think for you two, having your experience in Montessori for so many years and then transitioning to where you both are, whether it's independent or public, is also then adding on to that, right? Your experiences at the public school and independent is making you that well-rounded student to be so prepared for college. I'm so excited for you guys. I can't wait to hear what happens next.
We talked a bit about how, about the transition into high school and what worked for you and how you felt successful and what you did. I'm wondering whether you have a perspective on how a Montessori middle school experience or even a Montessori experience all the way through could better prepare you for, an educational experience as an older adolescent, no matter where you go?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, we've been praising Montessori. We all can agree that Montessori has a lot of benefits. It's a great philosophy, and clearly you two are very successful because of it. But what's one thing that you could say, on the flip side, that you wish maybe you had early in your career or experiences in your career in a Montessori program that would have prepared you better?
Yeah, I would say the one thing that would have really benefited me was more emphasis on test taking. I know that we did have, a few tests in middle school, but it wasn't like, it was very surface level, I'd say. And I think going into high school, what I saw from other ninth graders in my class was that they all already had like strategies towards how can they prepare for a test. Yes, we're young and it's like, wow, you know how to prepare for a test, but I think it's because they had so much practice in middle school and even elementary school. Some of them would tell me they had tests. It really, going into it, they weren't like stressed as I was. Like I remember in my first like Algebra 2 class, I was sitting there, I was like, how am I supposed to prepare for this test? Like, yes, it's memorization, but it's also like you're given an equation, you have to know how to solve it. Not each equation is solvable the same way. So it's like, how do I approach this? Do I just practice a lot? Do I memorize, all the possible ways of solving this? And it's like, yeah, so I think that was something that I think was really important to me because while, all these other kids seemed really set up for that, I was still figuring that out for myself. And I feel like that was a kind of obstacle I had to overcome. And obviously I overcame it. Like now I have, my whole way of that I study and prepare for a test. But I think that would have really helped me, confidently start my education system because right when you go into high school, it's like, you have tests, like 3 tests that same week. So I think it's something that should be done more. And not that the tests weren't hard in middle school, but they weren't real. They didn't feel like real tests in a sense.
Pro forma tests.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
What do you think, Josie?
I talked to some of my friends about this, and I think what I've heard them say, and I feel like I also feel this a little bit, is that at least when I was at LMS, it didn't feel like there was a great handling of people that were like neurodivergent or like didn't like think the same ways. I would say that like personally, I remember being like taken out of Spanish class because I was having trouble focusing in math. So instead of going to Spanish, I was supposed to like work on math problems or something with one of the teachers, but that teacher would always like forget. So it was usually just, I would just spend the time just like telling myself stories, writing things. And that was nice. But then I was supposed to go back to Spanish class in middle school, and I was kind of way behind everyone else. And then some of my teachers were like, okay, let's take you out of Spanish again. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that again. And I think they were like, well, you got to. But my parents were like, no, we're going to let her do it. So I did go back into Spanish, and I was fine. I'm still in Spanish. I'm in AP Spanish now. And I think it felt a little bit like I just wasn't sure what was going on. And I didn't know I had ADHD back then, but like it felt as though it was somehow my fault that I could not focus. And it felt like, oh, you just have to spend more time on math. You're just a person that needs more time on math. And I didn't feel like I quite had that like help and guidance. And obviously it would have been helpful to have that diagnosis back then. So I'm sure it made it really hard for the teachers to understand what was going on. But yeah, I think some of my other friends have had like OCD or other things like that. And they also felt like that they weren't exactly supported in that.
I happen to think, and thank you for sharing that about when we think about neurodivergent students. And I often happen to think that Montessori is a nice environment for some students that are neurodivergent, especially students that have attention deficit and executive functioning difficulties because of how much movement is allowed in the classroom. And you have the time, right? Which is lovely too. So can you speak to that and that transition from Montessori to high school and how, beyond the support from adults, right? Mm-hmm. The actual just spending time in the classrooms, right? Was there a difference between, how you felt like you were able to learn? And was one environment better than the other for you?
I would say, I don't think I get much any more support for like ADHD in high school, really.
Yes.
So I definitely feel like with the like movement thing and like being able to like go outside a lot. I remember going on like really long hikes. I remember we'd go on a hike to do this like film project. I remember that was like really fun, like filming some stuff like that. It just felt like so much moving and so much outdoor stuff. I mean, especially because of COVID, we had to be outdoors a lot. Sure. But going into high school and just going from class to class, just like sitting for like 6 hours a day, it was really hard. Like towards the end of the day, I would just be like, so like, oh, I've been sitting all day. And I definitely had to get used to sitting. And I felt so inactive. Like I just felt like, oh, I just want to go somewhere and move. But I guess I kind of got used to that. It's definitely something you have to get used to. But I do think that a school that has all that like moving around is very helpful for kids that are like ADHD or like need that kind of to like
that output.
Yeah. Yep. Let out some of that like pent up energy. And I don't think the middle school was probably as outdoors as it was when there was COVID times, but I think that was like super helpful for my learning.
No, that's super interesting and a great perspective. Thanks for sharing that.
So when you got to high school, did it look familiar to you? Was it similar to what you had seen on television?
I mean, in a sense, like, you know, you see those movies where it's like, oh yes, I'm so sorry. Okay, I'll start again. Going into high school, you know, you're so familiar with all these movies online where it's about like, oh, what is high school? Oh, there's always this romance going on, or like substances that all these kids are using.
Captain of the football team.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, for me, I went to private school, so I didn't have like, I go to private school, so I don't have like football team or anything like that. But I think it did notice some similarities, like in the whole romance scene where it's like, ooh, you're always like have someone you like, or you're like, you know, you hear all these stories of what kids do in school with their romance partners. It's like all this weird stuff. And then, you know, how do people, you know, adapt to substances? Like you hear like kids vaping in the locker rooms, and, you know, that very much happens. But I feel like that's also like wherever you go, that's the case. Like it's just, I think it's this transition where you go into high school and you have so much more freedom. So it's like, you know, you're going to experiment, you're going to get drawn into these things, but it's like really you have to be like, okay, how am I going to separate myself, and how am I going to be like, I'm not going to do that stuff, or it's not healthy for me. But also, you know, you can have these addictive moments where you feel like so drawn into something, but you know it's not good for you. So it was very similar from what I've seen on TVs. And I have like a lot of friends in my public school. I live in Bedford, and I have kids that go to Bedford Public School. And, you know, I've gone to some like hangouts, and it's like, you know, kids will be at someone's house in the basement. People will be like drinking and smoking and all this stuff. And it's like, it's not something I'm interested in. So I'm like, okay, like that's not for me. But also just like hearing about, you know, the prom that they have is different than the prom I have at my school, and like the relationships they have with teachers is different. But I would say that it's very similar to what, you know, you see in TV, not as dramatic as it's made in movies.
Yeah, it always looks to me like they spend most of their time in the hallway next to the lockers.
Yeah, that's definitely not the case, but there is similarity for sure.
Yeah, I think in TV, they often show like, these are the popular kids and these are the mean girls. And it's very cut and dry. Like, these people are going to be like this. But there are people that have like a lot of friends or big friend groups, but I wouldn't say there's like a group of popular people. And I wouldn't say there's like very noticeable bullying that happens in our school. Of course, I'm sure that there's people that will get bullied, but I don't see it like very much presenting. Like you can't quite see it, like see people like you on TV, you'll see someone like get like slammed against a locker. You don't really see that. In fact, when you do see it, it's like people play fighting with each other, which does happen a lot. But I would say it's less of just like, it's like, this person fits into this neat box of being mean girl or something like that. I think it's people are more like unique, and they don't have to fit into that box. So I would say that like when I got to high school, I thought like, oh, I have to think of all these witty comebacks to bullies or something like that. But I kind of realized that it's not going to be like that. Most people kind of has the same idea of me. It's just like, I like people. There's no reason for me to be mean to people. And the kids that are like popular are usually kind of like nice and want to have more friends. And that's why they're popular. So that makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, when I think of the high school experience, the bulk of the students in this country go to conventional high schools, and I have my own opinions about how high schools should run, but I'm not in charge of the world's high schools. And so, the importance of this conversation to me really is that we don't know where everybody's going to go when they finish whatever experience they have in elementary and middle school. But the important thing is that no matter where they go, that they feel like they are competent and confident and that they have something to bring to the table. And that when they get there, they will be valued and they will be respected as they go about continuing to learn. And, I think it's important for those of us who are working with kids who are preparing to go to high schools to know as much as we can about the kind of experience in a large, either suburban or even urban public high school. What are the dynamics of those schools so we can best prepare kids for that, and also so that we know the variety of other types of schools that are available in the independent sector, which is why it's so great to bring you guys in to talk of your experiences so that we can learn more about what it's like after the experience of the preparation years. I mean, I don't think of it as the preparation years, frankly. I mean, I
kind of do. I think after today's conversation, I think that's a great descriptor of what it feels like to have an opportunity to be in a Montessori program for so many years. And then, because you're essentially preparing them, right?
Yeah, I just think that a lot of people look at school as getting ready to be grown-ups.
Sure.
And I think of kids as being, fully legitimate human beings, in the moment that they're in. So I'm a little bit allergic to things being always preparing for the next thing. But I know what you mean. I really do feel this incredible gratitude to get to be with these guys when they're younger, and then even more so when they're willing to take the time to come back and talk about how things have gone since. It's really such a privilege to work with families as their children are growing up. And, personally, I think that growing up Montessori is the be all and end all, but that's just me.
Well, sure. Before we let you both go, just to piggyback on what Biff was just saying, because clearly Biff is very proud of both of you, proud of the program that he is part of and been part of for so long. You're fond of them and proud of them. And clearly he has a lot of memories of both of you since you spent so much time here at Lexington Montessori. I wonder if you have any interesting memories of Biff that you'd like to share with us today.
Yeah, I mean, I have a few, but I say the one that stands out is I remember it was in upper elementary school, and I don't know what I was prepping for. Was it the ISCE or what was it? It was called this word book. Basically, we had to learn like vocabulary, and it was like this huge book that we had to like take home and practice. And I remember my mom would always be like, "Symona, you're not getting this done. Like, this is not working well. Nothing is working." And then I know my family is very fond of, Montessori school, and very much so of Biff, and of the previous principal of the school, Eileen Gray, and they see them both as like second family. And my mom, I remember she had reached out to Biff and was like, "This is not working for Symona. Like, what can we do?" And I remember you came and you like sat down with me and you were helping me go through this word book. And you were like, at some point you had gotten just like, you were like, "Symona, what are you doing? Like, what is going on with you?" And I think it was just like a silly moment that, again, emphasizes on this connection that you can have with teachers or people who are older than you at such a young age. Like I was 11, 12 years old, but Biff to me was a friend and a mentor. And it was yes, he was trying to help me, figure out what I was doing, but also he was just, he's putting humor into it. He was laughing with me. He was making me feel special, basically. So it was, it's very special moments like that. And Biff was, Biff isn't a teacher and as part of, Montessori classrooms, but, Biff was always present. I'd always see Biff throughout the day at some point, and it was just a friendly face all the time. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think my memory mostly is of doing senior projects. I remember, I think you and Eliza did it together. Yeah, I remember you, I was making a slideshow presentation. My topic was I think the lives of girls in 3 different countries. And I remember, I think you were very supportive of me researching that topic. And I made a slideshow, and you were oh, I don't know if these pictures, I made these weird little animations, and you're I don't know if these pictures really help represent that. So you helped make helped fill in more better representative pictures, and helped tweak, I guess, the script to make it just more I guess representative of what I wanted to communicate. And I remember asking Eliza, why is he doing so much? Why he spent an hour helping me doing this? Doesn't he have so many other people to work with? And she was no, I think he really cares about your topic. And that's why, and I feel that's very important to have someone who really cares about the things that you're also interested in and can help you communicate that. Because just as a 6th grader, on my own, I don't think I can 100% communicate how girls live their lives in different countries in a way that won't be rude in some way, or a way that will fully explain it. So I think having that guidance of an adult being maybe you should say this, or maybe we should also focus on I think you were the one that recommended that we should also focus on how girls' lives might not be also great in America too, to not just be oh, in Kenya they're so bad, but here they're great. And I think that that's super important to learn how to have that sensitivity and have that help.
And that's a lovely story, because you didn't have to do that, right? So again, for our listeners, Biff is an administrator, right? You don't have your own classroom, but it sounds like you're traveling around throughout the day and helping out. And I love that you both had memories of that, of him. I
do still teach the research project that they were doing, so that was my responsibility. But what you say is really true. It's when somebody has a passionate interest in a topic, it doesn't get any better than that for a teacher.
Right. But it is fascinating to hear life after Montessori, right? And how just overall prepared you guys to become adults and your next stage, which is very exciting for both of you. And you both have been accepted to incredible schools and clearly have a really bright future. So it was so lovely just to hear your perspective. And I'm excited to hear what happens next. So somebody needs to keep me posted on this for both of you. But we wish you the best of luck. And thank you for being here. Well, that was quite the conversation, and I think it really hit all the points that you and I were hoping to cover during this episode.
2 delightful people.
I mean, just such bright futures ahead for them, and lovely, lovely, articulate young women.
The opportunity to talk to students who are finishing high school is a great one, because the challenges that teachers are faced with, no matter where they're teaching now, I mean, it's a culture that emphasizes testing, so that the teachers are limited in the extent to which they can be responsive to individuals, because they're required to prioritize certain things.
And when I don't mean to cut you off, but when you speak about teachers, we're not just talking about Montessori teachers. We're just talking about educators across the board, whether they're in a more traditional setting, whether they're in a Montessori setting, whether they're in a more independent school setting. So I think this episode, if anything, really hits home for all educators. And again, not really pigeonholing it to Montessori. The one thing I really love, though, is there's a lot of good take-homes from, what Montessori offers, and how, educators that are, again, aren't Montessori trained teachers that are practicing in a more traditional setting, things that they can bring into their classroom or ways to kind of communicate with their students that has clearly proven to be successful and for these particular women that we spoke with today. And so I just think there's a lot of good take-homes for any kind of educator out there from this conversation, even though we did focus a little bit more heavily on Montessori. But I think across the board, it's just helpful just to hear their perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think Montessori has a lot of answers for a lot of the challenges that the teachers everywhere are facing. I mean, the culture demands accountability in a way that it has not always demanded accountability, especially for younger children. Right. And so a lot of teachers are facing that. A lot of teachers are facing not having enough of the stuff that they need to teach. And so finding ways to give the students responsibility for their learning can alleviate some of that. A lot of teachers have more children than they're used to having. Class sizes are big, and the emphasis that I think could be placed on building conscious community in classrooms, I think would be helpful for any classroom.
Absolutely. On that line of thinking, also just creating this relationship between the teacher and the student and have that mutual respect that clearly went a long way for both of these girls.
You know, it's interesting that they experienced and described the experience of learning that that most people that they met when they got to high school didn't realize that they could work with their teachers, that they were on the same side.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I think that's also true of teachers. I think a lot of teachers don't know that their students want to be connected and related to them, because they also, for whatever reason, feel like there is this chasm between the world of students and the world of
the
teachers.
Red tape, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to hear a message from kids saying, get to know us.
Yeah.
You know,
we have a lot to say.
We have a lot to say. And our goal is not to make trouble.
That, and also, while we have a lot to say, we also want to hear from you as a teacher. Again, it's bidirectional, right? In terms of that mutual respect. And I think it opens up that love of learning, right? Or being more open to learning. So I think that's one of our biggest take homes. But it was a fascinating conversation. I'm excited to hear what happens for these two.
Yeah.
And with that, I'm looking forward to our next conversation.
Me too. If you're enjoying this conversation as much as we are, following the show on your streaming service really helps more people discover the podcast.
This episode is sponsored by TriNet. TriNet offers comprehensive HR solutions specifically designed for the education sector. Their services include payroll processing, benefits administration, risk mitigation, and compliance support. It enables schools and educational institutions to focus on their core mission. With TriNet, managing HR becomes seamless. It allows educators to dedicate more time to teaching and supporting students. To find out more, go to trinet.com AMS 2025. This podcast is produced by AMS, the American Montessori Society. However, the views that are expressed belong to us and to those of our guests. They do not represent those of the American Montessori Society.